welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on Newsline Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you, and our big focus continues to be on the escalating tensions in the Middle East. Israel has invaded Lebanon, and reports suggest the United States has indications that Iran is preparing for an imminent ballistic missile attack on Israel in response. While Israel has chosen to term it a limited operation, fact is Israel's ground offensive in neighboring Lebanon has begun. The incursion into southern Lebanon is targeting Hezbollah strongholds, infrastructure and hideouts. Israeli officials have described the offensive as localized raids that are very limited in scope. They claim there would be no long-term occupation of Lebanon. The incursion, which Israel's Security Cabinet has called the next phase of its war with Hezbollah, marks the fourth time that Israeli soldiers have publicly entered Lebanese territory in nearly 50 years, and the first since Israel's 34-day war in the country in 2006. The escalation in the war in just the last few days has killed more than 1,000 people, destroyed homes and displaced 1 million people in Lebanon. The Israeli military says its soldiers, including paratroopers and commandos, as well as armored corps troops, had been preparing for limited localized targeted operations in southern Lebanon that began last night. They say the soldiers had gained skills and operational experience in Gaza over many months. Hezbollah has rejected claims that Israeli forces have entered southern Lebanon, describing them as lies. The Israeli military has called for residents in more than 24 villages in southern Lebanon to evacuate approximately 30 miles into the country to the north of the Al-Awali River. Their warning says anyone in close proximity to Hezbollah members or their facilities or combat equipment is putting their life at risk. Any house used by Hezbollah for military purposes is expected to be targeted. In an earlier social media post, the Israeli military spokesperson called on residents not to travel using vehicles north of the Litani River towards southern Lebanon. The Israeli military says they had informed the United Nations peacekeeping forces on Monday of their intent to undertake limited ground incursions into Lebanon. The UN has said any crossing into Lebanon is in violation of Lebanese sovereignty and territorial integrity and a violation of Resolution 1701. We urge all actors to step back from such escalatory acts, which will only lead to more violence and more bloodshed. Resolution 1701 is the 2006 UN Security Council resolution, which called for a permanent ceasefire and end to hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel. The resolution also stipulates that Hezbollah forces must withdraw north of the Litani River in Lebanon and that only the Lebanese military should hold positions in the border area. As we said, Israel claims this is a limited operation, but not only is limited a subjective term, previous military operations initially declared by Israel to be limited have proved to be anything but that. Examples include Israel's years-long occupation of southern Lebanon that began in 1982 with the stated aim of a brief and limited mission to destroy the Palestinian Liberation Organization. More recently, Israel's military had declared a limited operation in Rafah in southern Gaza that has left the city in ruins. The latest escalation comes after Israel killed Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah in an airstrike on Friday and decimated the leadership of the most powerful paramilitary force in the Middle East. The Israeli military had earlier said it was focused on removing immediate threats from Lebanese villages along the border, including Hezbollah's ability to infiltrate northern Israel. While the extent of Israel's military plans inside Lebanon remain unclear, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has become increasingly defiant of international calls for restraint and de-escalation, as well as widespread outrage over growing civilian casualties in both Gaza and now Lebanon. Israel and Lebanon-based Hezbollah have been engaged in a tit-for-tat escalation since the war in Gaza began last year, following Hamas's attack on Israel. Hezbollah first attacked Israel on the 8th of October and has said it will not stop striking Israel until a ceasefire is reached in the Gaza Strip. much of which has been reduced to rubble by Israeli bombs and fighting. In recent weeks, Israel has refocused its military objectives to the north with a new war aim to return displaced residents to their homes along the Lebanon border. About 60,000 Israeli civilians have been forced from their homes by Hezbollah's rocket attacks. What has unfolded is some of the fiercest fighting between the two longtime foes since the 2006 Lebanon war, which killed more than 1,100 people in the country. Nearly 50 Israeli civilians and 121 Israeli soldiers were also killed in that war. Last month, pagers and walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah members exploded across Lebanon in a coordinated Israeli attack that killed dozens of people and maimed thousands, including women and children. Israel has also stepped up a relentless bombing campaign across Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah's infrastructure and leadership. But the strikes have also decimated homes and entire neighborhoods in densely populated areas. Massive airstrikes in capital Beirut have killed a string of Hezbollah leaders and more than 1,000 people, many of them civilians. The latest developments raise questions about how a weakened Hezbollah will respond and the extent to which its backer Iran could get involved, once more ratcheting up fears of a wider regional war. Hezbollah is part of an Iran-led alliance spanning Yemen, Syria, Gaza and Iraq that has attacked Israel and its allies since the war with Hamas began. Iran calls it the axis of resistance. In a fiery speech on Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said one of the country's goals is changing the balance of power in the region and that there is no place in Iran or the Middle East that the long arm of Israel will not reach. Killing Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and wiping out the group's capabilities to launch a large-scale attack on Israel were necessary conditions to achieve that goal, he said. Israel has also ramped up attacks on multiple other fronts against other Iran-backed militants, including launching strikes targeting the Houthis in Yemen. But despite the recent Israeli strikes on its proxies, Iran has so far appeared wary of moving into direct conflict with its longtime enemy, even as their decades-long shadow war has been pushed further into the open. Many observers fear any direct Iranian retaliation could draw the United States further into the conflict. Netanyahu on Monday took public aim at Iran. In a televised speech, he told the Iranian people that Israel stands with you, directly addressing them without filters, without middlemen, as he put it. And he repeated his appeal to Iranians to reject their government. In the same attack that assassinated Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah, a senior member of Iran's powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps was also killed. In response, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei warned that Israel faces crushing blows to come. Several countries and UN bodies have warned of the impact on civilians in Lebanon and the risk of further regional instability. The European Union has renewed its call for an immediate ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has called for the respect of international humanitarian law in all circumstances and said the sovereignty of both Israel and Lebanon has to be guaranteed. The French Foreign Minister urged Israel on Monday to refrain from any ground incursion into Lebanon and called on both sides to agree to a ceasefire. The United Arab Emirates expressed deep concern over the recent escalations, fearing its impact on regional stability, adding that the Gulf state reaffirmed its unwavering position towards the unity of Lebanon, its national sovereignty and territorial integrity. The UAE has also directed an urgent $100 million relief package for the people of Lebanon. Jordan has expressed its rejection of the Israeli aggression against Lebanon. Saudi Arabia has said it stresses the need to preserve Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Qatar has expressed solidarity with Lebanon as well as readiness to provide support to the people to confront the consequences of the Israeli aggression. Turkey has condemned Israel's ground operation, calling it a violation of sovereignty and an unlawful act of occupation. The United Nations Agency for Humanitarian Emergencies has warned of the devastating impact on civilians of the escalations in Lebanon. The UN agency has urged the international community to urgently promote de-escalation and ensure that all parties respect international humanitarian law while prioritizing immediate humanitarian assistance to the affected people. As we said, limited is a subjective word. What Israel sees as a targeted and limited ground operation in southern Lebanese villages may look like a catastrophe to civilians on the ground. Limited has been used to describe incursions into Lebanon before. In 1982, Israel described its invasion of southern Lebanon as limited. What followed was a bloody 18-year occupation and many thousands of lives lost. Also, one key restraint from previous conflicts appears increasingly impotent this time around. Many analysts say the current situation also brings into sharp focus how the once mighty United States of America is increasingly powerless to rein in its ally or to influence other major belligerents in a fast worsening regional crisis. The White House says Israel has the right to defend itself, but it has also warned of the risk of mission creep in a ground operation that could ultimately broaden in scope and turn into a longer-term incursion. President Joe Biden last week unveiled a 21-day ceasefire proposal backed by other U.S. allies that was almost immediately rejected by the Israeli Prime Minister, much to the frustration and chagrin of the White House. The U.S. is a key provider of Israel's weapons. It likely supplied the 2,000-pound bombs that were used to kill Hezbollah's leader. And while Biden and his advisors have continued to call for a diplomatic resolution, the pleas have clearly fallen on deaf ears. Israel's ground operation started just hours after President Biden called for a ceasefire. The U.S. administration's diplomatic efforts for a ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza have often been publicly undermined by the Israeli Prime Minister. The proposal for a temporary Israel-Lebanon ceasefire is now a distant memory. The disconnect is widening as it coincides with the end game of a cliffhanger U.S. election. Biden's room for maneuver is limited if he is to avoid exacerbating the domestic political impact of war in the Middle East, a factor Netanyahu clearly understands. The Democratic presidential nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris, has largely stuck to the Biden administration line. Observers point out that the pattern of American impotency and Israeli defiance has played out repeatedly since the 7th October Hamas attacks on Israel, which prompted the Israeli pounding of Gaza and the more recent attempt to destroy Hezbollah in Lebanon. Netanyahu often acts first and consults the United States later, even when his actions are certain to buckle American diplomatic efforts and compound fears that the U.S. will get dragged into a disastrous regional war. The U.S. was not informed in advance, for instance, about the Israeli airstrike that killed Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, even though its global shockwaves were bound to be severe. This Israeli approach has often made the Biden administration appear like a spectator rather than an active player in events, as should befit a superpower. Months of grueling shuttle diplomacy by Secretary of State Antony Blinken have mostly drawn a blank, and the U.S. has incessantly pushed for a Gaza ceasefire that neither Netanyahu nor Hamas seems to want. The Israeli leaders bet that for all its reservations, the Biden administration will remain the guarantor of the Jewish state's security seems to have paid off. The U.S. and its allies helped repel a massive Iranian missile and drone attack against Israel in the month of April. The strikes followed an Israeli strike that the U.S. did not know about in advance on an Iranian diplomatic compound in Damascus that killed 8 senior IRGC officers. And so far, Biden, who has long prided himself on being one of the most pro-Israeli politicians in American history, has been reluctant to use the leverage that he has, such as permanently cutting off U.S. military supplies for Israel, a step that would, of course, have huge political reverberations ahead of the U.S. presidential election and leave Biden accused of deserting an ally fighting terror. A conundrum that Netanyahu has clearly taken advantage of. The question now is, what happens in the Middle East next? And could the U.S. get dragged into yet another war?
One of the buildings that our troops raided, we found proof of this. This is a map that Hezbollah planned to give its terrorists at the time of a wide-scale invasion into the state of Israel, as part of its Conquer the Galilee plan to carry out an October 7th massacre in Israel's north. As you can see on the map, there is a key marking Israeli communities, IDF posts, access roads, and targets for attack. We found this map on one of the compounds that was supposed to be used by thousands of Hezbollah terrorists on the day they carried out their invasion. Hezbollah planned to launch their October 7th attack from villages across southern Lebanon, where they have been building up their arms capabilities and forces for the last 2 decades. Hezbollah also dug tunnels under homes in these villages close to the border with Israel. For years, Israel has warned the world that Hezbollah is violating international law and United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, which prohibits the presence of armed militants and weapons in southern Lebanon. This was a resolution that the international community agreed on, and Lebanon and UNIFIL failed to enforce.
We have been in conversations. They have been informing us about a number of operations. I've seen reports about ground operations. We've had some conversations with them about that. They have, at this time, told us that those are limited operations focused on Hezbollah infrastructure near the border, but we're in continuous conversations with them about it. We, of course, continue to support a ceasefire, but I think sometimes people either misinterpret or have their own version of what a ceasefire is. A ceasefire is not one side in a conflict unilaterally putting down its arms and stopping the conflict. It is an agreement for both sides to stop the conflict. And in this case, what we have proposed is a 21-day ceasefire where both sides would stop attacking the other and we would reach a diplomatic resolution. And we are going to continue to engage with our Israeli counterparts, with Lebanese counterparts, and with other countries around the world to reach that objective. But at the same time, there are a couple other things that are true as well, which is that number one, military pressure can at times enable diplomacy. Of course, military pressure can also lead to miscalculation. It can lead to unintended consequences. And we're in conversations with Israel about all of these factors now.
I am warning Israel very clearly from here. The results of its ground operation into Lebanon will not be similar to its invasions in the past. Lebanon's defense will not be same as the defense in Gaza, which is defenseless, isolated, and blocked off from rest of the world. Starting with the United Nations, all states and international organizations must stop Israel before losing any more time, before more women, children die. Likewise, the Islamic world must certainly side with the people and the government of Lebanon in defending their homeland. We, as Turkey and the Turkish people, we will never leave our Lebanese brothers alone in these difficult days, and we will support them with all our means.
It is a very serious and dangerous situation that's developing currently in the Middle East. What could happen next? We're going to pose that question to our panelists in just a moment after this quick break on Global Lens. Stay with us.
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
Who am I?
Nobody can crack that mystery.
There is a certain expectation of me.
That's the only contradiction.
Life itself is stranger than fiction.
I was a perfectly normal person born in an abnormal world.
I really didn't understand why is it different.
Just imagine a child who is bullied every day.
Boys school में कुछ लड़का लोग मेरे साथ sexual abuse किए.
मुझे तेरे बारे में सब पता है और मैं तेरा रेप कर लूँगा.
You also start to stigmatize.
अरे ये तो time pass है.
Sex doesn't come in the picture. Sex comes very late. Then there are man-made narratives.
Why do you walk like that? Why do you sway so much? So you can understand the trauma of a person who's trapped in a wrong body.
But nothing can bind life.
We have to reclaim the lost position. We fought for more than 10 years.
Today I'm the mother of the industry.
I'm a first transgender member judge.
You can't walk in everybody's shoes.
This is what I'm comfortable with. We just are what we are.
You become the light yourself.
That is the change that I was looking for.
When I recognize myself is a small story, but it's an interesting one.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the escalating conflict in the Middle East. Let's introduce our guests. Joining me on Global Lens tonight, Itai Melchior, former executive with the Israeli National Security Council, a Middle East expert, and of course a familiar face on Global Lens. Major General Ashwani Savaj, defense and geopolitical expert, is also with us. And completing the panel tonight is Chirayu Thakkar, doctoral candidate of international relations at the National University of Singapore. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to all of you. Itai Melchior, let me begin with you. You and many other Israeli guests who've appeared on our show in the last few days have repeatedly expressed the confidence that Iran would not want to get directly involved in any sort of conflict with Israel. But going by the reports that have emerged in just the last 1 hour, it would seem like that optimism may be completely misplaced. Report after report seems to suggest the United States has indications that Iran is preparing to launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel in response to Israel's ground invasion of Lebanon. Your response?
Yes, well, as you said, Neha, those are all indications coming from the US. If they are true and we have no intelligence to counter that or to prove that, then this will most likely not be limited only to Iran, but will involve attacks also from Yemen, of the Houthis, from the Iranian militias in Iraq, and maybe also from Hezbollah in Lebanon, depending on what is happening there. I also want to remind that we've steadfast said that Israel will not go full power into Lebanon. Remember, Israel has invaded Lebanon 3 times. Twice it was to the Litani River, last time in 2006, and in the first Lebanon war, all the way past to Beirut and a bit beyond. So this is not the case now. The incursion now is only to very close proximity of the border, specifically targeting Hezbollah infrastructure, which was found and shown to be prepared to launch attacks into Israel. So we don't see movement of the army, a full-fledged attempt to conquer and clear all the area all the way to the Litani, as has been suggested. I still think Israel does not want to do that, because in the end, even if we do conquer all the area all the way to the Litani, we will end up withdrawing with some agreement, and therefore to get an agreement without all the hassle is much better. So therefore, this is my prediction right now.
Okay, very brave of you to still be making that prediction, I must say. And as I said at the start of my show, the word limited is very subjective and has different connotations for different people. What Israel considers to be a limited ground invasion of southern Lebanon could mean catastrophe to many civilians on the ground. As a matter of fact, limited is a word that Israel has used multiple times in the past, including during its invasion of Lebanon in 1982 and more recently when it entered Rafah in southern Gaza. And we've seen that the outcome was anything but limited in nature and scale. Let me now take this to my Indian guest. Major General Ashwani Savaj, our Israeli guest, says if reports emerging from Israel are indeed correct, then there could be a multi-front, multi-pronged attack on Israel all at once. Of course, they are already at war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen and Syria could all come into play simultaneously. And now reports seem to suggest that the US has gathered intelligence pointing to a possible ballistic missile attack by Iran on Israel. Now, if that's the kind of situation that we are looking at, it could be absolutely catastrophic for the region, because the moment Iran gets directly involved in a conflict with Israel, something that has never happened before, I think, the United States getting dragged in would be inevitable.
Absolutely. Neha, no doubt about it. I certainly feel now also that possibility of Iran directly getting involved are still less, because he will like to go through his proxies, that is Hezbollah, Hamas and Houthi rebel, and also in militia in Iraq and Syria. But as the intelligence report of US are claiming that Iran is preparing for direct confrontation with Israel, obviously, in case Iran get involved directly with Israel, it will also suck in US. So the US has no choice but to come into this war, which US has been telling time and again, in case Iran directly get involved, then it will protect Israel. So therefore, the point is, the moment US comes into this war, now 2-3 things will happen. One is that the scope of this war will increase, their chances of it broadening up also increase, and also the Iran will be the biggest sufferer. Remember that Iran economy not doing well, it has a lot of sanction. Its new president, Jeskian, is a moderator. It wants the JCPO to start and economic sanction to be removed. That will go down the lane. In fact, the war will have so much adverse effect that the Americans and Israelis are going to target the energy sector of Iran, also their nuclear installation. So therefore, the point is that will Iran like to get involved directly? I certainly feel that it want to act because it want to show that it still have a muscle power. But then it has never acted so far when Ismail Hania died or Fawaz Shakur died. Now,
but this is different, sir. This is different. While you're right that Ismail Haniyeh was killed on Iranian territory and that was a strong provocation, but here we are talking about the invasion of another country, Lebanon, and also let's not forget that Hezbollah is often described as the jewel or the diamond in Iran's crown of its proxies, its militias.
Yeah, 2 points. Neha, one thing is very clear that in case Israel goes for a limited offensive also in Lebanon, it won't be an easy walk for Israel. Very correctly brought out by Hezbollah is 3 to 4 more powerful than Hamas. It has got about 125 lakh rockets and missiles. It has got about 1 lakh fighting soldier. It has got an armor brigade. It is well prepared. So first of all, it won't be easy walk for Israel. And the second thing is, I suppose as on today, Israel is only ensuring that the border area is secure. Though the aim of Israel is to get back those 70 to 80,000 Israelis which have gone and left this area because Hezbollah was firing. And to get them back, you have to push the Hezbollah from the southern Lebanon to the central Lebanon. For that, you have to go inside. May not be a deep incursion, but a shallow incursion, which Israel is thinking of doing. Whether it enlarges later, that time will only tell. But as on today, Israel is also not interested that it will go deep inside, because the Hezbollah is going to respond to you in a very, very robust manner.
Israel may not be interested in going deep inside Lebanese territory, but fact of the matter is it has launched a ground invasion of southern Lebanon. We can go on and on about semantics and whether it is limited, and this, that and the other. The question now is, how is Iran going to respond? I don't think it is up to Israel anymore. The question is, how is Iran going to respond? And before I take a break, sir, I have some breaking news. Before I take a break, I need to inform my viewers that the US Embassy in Israel has directed all US government employees, diplomats, their families to shelter in place until further notice. This comes soon after reports emerged that according to US intelligence, there's credible evidence to suggest that Iran is preparing to launch a ballistic missile attack on Israel as we speak. I need to take a quick break here on Global Lens. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue this discussion with our panelists, including Chirayu Thakkar, who hasn't spoken yet.
This is News 9 Live, India's only digital exclusive live stream. For the early adopters, bringing you the news 24/7. For the smart audiences on the smartest TVs. News 9 Live. Stream now on your smart TVs.
Cooking is an act of love. The first act of love you receive from our mothers in the families.
Modern Indian food is all about contemporary and innovative approach to traditional Indian cooking.
The presentation it's also important,
I want to wear this white coat every day and then be a chef.
There are stories. If the name of whiskey is invades, then there is a whole story behind that.
Cooking food is like a therapy, and eating one is like a pleasure I can give it to myself. With Lounge Nights, I'm on a journey to celebrate and recognize the best food and nightlife establishments in various cities across India.
Radico presents Lounge Nights every Saturday and Sunday only on News 9 Live.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the escalating conflict in the Middle East. Shirayu Thakkar, you heard what we shared with our viewers in the earlier segment. The US Embassy in Israel has asked all its diplomats, other employees and their families to shelter in place. This comes close on the heels of US intelligence inputs that suggest that as we speak, Iran is preparing to attack Israel. Your thoughts on what might happen next? Till just a couple of hours ago, most analysts seem to think Iran would not want to get directly involved in a conflict with Israel. Do you believe that could change very fast?
Neha, good evening and thank you for having me. I think the last series of attacks and the ground invasion undertaken by Israel has pushed the Iranian regime to the wall. Initially, as I was saying to you a few days ago on your show, and I think our friend was also here, the Israeli friend was also here, Iran was behaving with restraint. And this restraint was not coming from some sort of wisdom or some sort of, this large-heartedness, but it was because Iran is in a very difficult situation economically. There's a new regime in place. Some of its exists of resistance infrastructure that it used to rely on was not in place completely. And then a series of attacks further challenged or crippled that infrastructure. So we saw what happened to Hamas. Israelis are claiming that 40% of Hamas leadership and membership is wiped off. We don't know exactly how much is that because it is difficult to corroborate. The Hezbollah leadership from top to the first and second tier leadership is completely wiped off. They are, struggling to maintain that command and control and communication system because their old pager and walkie-talkie network is out of place, and any other means of technology they use, it is susceptible to Israeli surveillance. So right now, there is no option. Now, this puts the Iranian regime in a very difficult situation. Either they swallow this and have a loss of face, which they can't do. Because remember, this is a regime which has to survive. It is not very popular. There are so many challenges with them. And if you listen to what Netanyahu was saying from UNGA dais, he was directly appealing to Iranian people, and he was appealing to that segment which is really disenchanted with the regime. So now there are only two options for the regime: either swallow and dial down and accept and ask Hamas to release the hostages and take time to regroup, to build this axis of resistance, to build its own self. That is not, this regime is not going to do. And the second option is you hit back. Now, with what intensity it is hitting back, that is the key question in my opinion. The breaking news that you shared with us just a moment ago regarding US embassy officials, I think this is a very rare warning where embassy asked all of its officials to go underground in shelters. This has rarely happened. Also, you have to remember that Israel has moved its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is considered as a fortress. During all these episodes, you would have never heard that rockets have reached all the way to Jerusalem. And if an embassy that is in Jerusalem, if they are getting this sort of a warning, it means that Americans fear an imminent Israeli attack. The only question is, what is the intensity and what will be the next step? Also, in your package, you showed Erdogan's this warning, but again, I'm not taking that too seriously. Right now, the dynamics is between Israel and Iran, and we have to see what role each party is playing and how much they are willing to escalate.
And not to mention the United States. Let me go back to Itai Melchior at this point. Itai Melchior, Chirayu Thakur seems to think the moment for Iran to swallow its pride has gone. The only option it's probably left with is to now attack. The question is, how far is Iran willing to go? Do you believe we could have a repeat of the kind of situation that we saw unfolding in the month of April this year, when there were these missile and rocket attacks exchanged between Israel and Iran, and both sides in a sense claimed victory, and also it sort of gave them a face saver and an off ramp, as it were. Do you believe that Iran in this situation is looking for a face saver and an off ramp, or do you believe that it could actually go all out?
Yeah, I think the previous expert, Tucker, I understand, was spot on. I think that actually Netanyahu's comments yesterday over the head of the Iranian leaders to the Iranian people were a big insult. No leader likes another leader speaking directly to his people and trying to get them to mutiny against him. So I'm sure this is all part of the bigger picture. Now, according to my sources, Iran is going to limit its planned attack, at least that's what the US sources are saying, to attack a few bases, air base in the south, an air base in the north, and some intelligence HQ probably in the center. What Tucker actually missed is that we have had shots fired towards Jerusalem. Just last week we had shots towards Male Adumim, which is only a few kilometers from Jerusalem, fired from Lebanon. We've had firing towards Jerusalem from the Gaza Strip in the past, and also from the east. So it's not something to be off the table. I would be very careful, as that is also a holy place for the Islam. But we have seen both the Hezbollah and Hamas and other rockets hitting and targeting. Actually, the only casualty was a Bedouin girl in the south of the nomad Bedouins who was injured in the April attack. So I think this is also something that they maybe are not taking into consideration. But as they would claim to be attacking only military targets, this would put Israel at a bit of a problematic spot, because what do you do? How do you retaliate? Do you go against civilian infrastructure like you did in Yemen, attacking oil infrastructure, which is important and maybe the only thing still going for the Iranian economy? Or do you target military targets like Israel did last time, or even possibly take a stab at some of the nuclear facilities?
As we speak, there are reports, Reuters, the news agency, has reported, Netanyahu has warned of testing days ahead. He tells Israelis to heed safety instructions. So within 24 hours, a lot seems to have changed. Just yesterday, as you've pointed out, as Chirayu has pointed out, he was almost taunting the Iranian regime, addressing the Iranian people directly to, in a sense, revolt against the Iranian regime. And now Netanyahu seems to be finally waking up to the reality that An Iranian retaliation could be imminent. The US has issued a warning to its own embassy employees in Jerusalem. Now your Prime Minister is warning his countrymen and women of testing days ahead, saying Israelis need to heed safety instructions. Before I take this back to my Indian guest, Itai, my question to you is, I know that we are in uncharted territory right now. The situation is as tense and unpredictable as it could get. But what really is your assessment of, what we're picking up right now, especially what the US media is reporting? How much worse do you believe this could get? And also, what do you make of the argument that's made repeatedly that once Iran gets directly involved in a war with Israel, the US will inevitably get sucked in?
So I don't believe that the US will attack Iran. I think that for one, they're going to assist Israel in thwarting the upcoming attack, like they've done in the past, together with other allies, not only the US. That said, I think that, it's always a delicate line between Israel and the US, because sometimes Israel is on a shorter leash from the US. Some of the weaponry is US made, and we don't really fully want to surprise the US, and many of the things are consulted or at least notified in advance. And then the question will be, if Israel decides to strike back strongly at Iran, which they didn't do last time, it was very symbolic, the attack in April, the Israeli attack in April. And if Israel decides to do something stronger, the question will be, how will the don't sound from the Biden administration? And that we will have to wait and see. As you said, this is uncharted territories. There are a lot of variables at play here. Some of them also end with the success. Fully through, Israel can maybe act lighter. If there are casualties and harm, then maybe Israel will have to go more fully in. That said, still, I don't see the US participating in an attack physically on Iran.
It's interesting you talk about the potential role of the Biden administration in this. You also said, Israel consults the US and takes it into confidence. Let me give you a reality check here. There are many analysts, and I'm addressing this to all my panelists, there are many analysts who have pointed out that the once mighty United States now looks increasingly powerless and helpless to rein in its ally or to influence any of the other belligerents in the region. Netanyahu seems to act first and informs the US later. For instance, the US was not informed about the Israeli airstrike that killed Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah. And this is a pattern of, it's being described as American impotency. These are not my words. These are words that are being used by a lot of American observers today who say that this pattern of American impotency and Israeli defiance has played out repeatedly since the 7th of October last year. Biden has repeatedly made pleas for a ceasefire. Those pleas have fallen on deaf ears. Let me also inform my viewers that Israel's ground operation in Lebanon started hours after President Biden called for a ceasefire. Therefore, let me put this question to both Major General Ashwini Sivaj and Chirayu Thakkar, starting with Major General Sivaj. Sir, has the once mighty United States of America become practically impotent and powerless in dealing with an increasingly defiant Israel led by an aggressive Netanyahu who just doesn't seem to listen to anybody, not even to his closest ally?
Absolutely. See, Neha, as far as Netanyahu there, he's very clear. What is the national interest of Israel today? Their national interest is that somehow, however, that he has to ensure the 70 to 80,000 Israelis have to go back. And they can't go back until unless the threat is still there from Lebanon. And the second thing is to degrade the military capability of Hezbollah the way they have done of Hamas. To do that, he's not going to listen to the US. Now, as far as the point which we are trying to convey, that what will be the response of Iran? Now, there are two options as far as Iran is concerned. One is a stronger option and one is a symbolic option. Now, if it is a stronger option, then he's playing into the basically a trap of Israel. Israel wants the Iran to get involved in this war. The moment Iran get involved, there will be a US which will get involved. Whether it will directly take part or it will support it, but certainly the might of Israel and US and other allied forces, Iran will suffer badly. Iran economy not up to the mark. Its nuclear installation as the energy sector will collapse in another about few days. So the point today is coming is actually the script has been written by Netanyahu. He is unfolding the situation, is moving in the same way. It is not US, it is not Hezbollah. It is what Israel is dictating terms, and this is the way things are unfolding. But one thing is very clear, in case Iran strongly respond and it strikes in the heart of Israel, then Israel will also strike back and the US will also get sucked in. And as far as the US getting sucked in concerned, there is no doubt. And as far as Netanyahu is concerned, he is not coming under the pressure of US. Very rightly brought out by you, certain input, certain decision, they are first acting, then only informing US. They don't want the cat to be out of the bag. They want the secrecy to be maintained. And so far, the way they have done three things. One is pager, then is your walkie-talkie, and then elimination of Hassan Nasrallah, Fawaz Shakur, Ibrahim Akil. It shows that it will do what it likes. It will not inform US. It will only inform US after that.
The act, that's exactly what Israel has done time and again, often catching its own strongest ally off guard. Might I add, even publicly embarrassing the Biden administration. For instance, you know, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken for months now has been engaging in shuttle diplomacy. He's been going from country to country in the Middle East, hoping to broker a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. It's been 11 months since the war erupted. Clearly, all of those efforts have failed spectacularly. Let me take this to Chirayu Thakkar. Chirayu, even as we wait to see what Iran is going to do next, whether it's going to be a token attack that it launches against Israel to make a point, or if it does in fact strike at the heart of Israel, as the Major General said, then Israel will inevitably hit back and the US will inevitably get sucked into that war. But for a moment, I want to focus on, again, these are not my words. These are words that are being used today by many American observers. The American impotency, the sheer helplessness and powerlessness of the world's lone superpower that seems to be on display here in the context of Israel and the Middle East. What explains it in your view? There are those who say that, you know, Netanyahu is counting on the fact that no matter how much Biden tells him to go for a ceasefire, to, you know, rein in his military, at the end of the day, the United States will continue to be a guarantor of Israeli security. Biden will not want to be seen as deserting an ally that was fighting terror. Is that a conundrum faced by the Biden administration that Netanyahu is taking full advantage of? How do you read the situation?
Neha, your question can be answered at many levels and in many ways. You talked about American impotency so far when it comes to Israeli policy. You see, you don't have to just read one or two articles or see what is happening recently. John Mearsheimer, Professor John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt, two of the finest American thinkers, realists, and they have written an entire book called The Israel Lobby. And it is one of the finest readings how time and again Israel has gotten its way against American interest at times, you know, whenever it wants to get away with it. So that is a reality of US-Israel relations. Now, why the Biden administration is doing it? Look, one way of thinking about this is that if you look at the wider Middle East, American footprint is constantly reducing. Israel is a window to a lot of dynamics that are being played out there, and US wants to remain somehow involved. Now, specifically the Biden administration, I would say there is a mix of defiance and the art of selling. See, on the one hand, occasionally Netanyahu is able to defy. And the underwritten argument is that, you know, this is Israel's 9/11, the October 7 attack, the horrors of it, they were so egregious that we have the right to respond. So that is the primary argument that allows Netanyahu to be defined and say that if this would have happened to Americans, how would you have responded? And I think that tempers the response on the American side when it comes to Israel. Occasionally, both the US and its allies, they have shown some spine in standing up to Netanyahu. There was this issue of 2,000 kilo bombs. There was another issue that was discussed in the House of Commons when the British Defence Secretary said that certain arms and ammo would not be supplied. But I think those are very small public signaling things. Largely, Israel is very much able to get away, specifically Bibi Netanyahu is able to get away with what he wants. The second aspect is the art of persuasion. And that is where a lot of behind the scene diplomacy happens. Also, you have to remember that the public might have fallen for this larger 41,000 people killing, and it's a very bad thing. But Israel can still go to America and say that, look, our hostages are there, including 5 Americans. And when American hostages are there, it gets extremely difficult for the Biden administration to go on the other side and say that we are preventing the ground assault or we are not supporting Bibi Netanyahu.
You know, you're right. You're right about that. This is a very tricky situation for the United States. However, you know, I don't think that there is a very big appetite among Americans for yet another war. I think that is also something that we need to consider. There are a very large number of Americans on the eve of a crucial presidential election have said in survey after survey that they do not want their country involved in multiple wars around the globe. There's already the Russia-Ukraine war going on. We're seeing what's happening in the Middle East. They do not want their country to get sucked into yet another active, you know, war or conflict zone. And you know, you talked about how Netanyahu uses the 9/11 argument, but surely the Americans would have learned some lessons from their invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq in the wake of 9/11. I need to play out for our viewers the statement that has been made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a short while ago. Let's listen in.
We are in the midst of a campaign against Iran's axis of evil. I said yesterday that these days are of great achievements and great challenges. Great achievements because we thwarted Nasrallah and his top command and Hezbollah's plan to occupy the Galilee. We are determined to return our residents in the north safely to their homes. But on the other hand, there are also big challenges. I ask you for 2 things. 1, to strictly obey the directives of the Home Front Command. It saves lives. And second, to stand together. We will stand firm together in the testing days ahead. Together we will stand, together we will fight, and together we will win.
Okay, Netanyahu there saying to the Israeli people, we are fighting, Iran's axis. Iran calls it the axis of resistance. Israel calls it the axis of evil. But clearly, Netanyahu there preparing his country for a possible imminent attack by Iran. Let me take this back to Itai Melchior. Itai, what do you make of that statement, that video statement that has just been released by your Prime Minister? Also, your thoughts on why and how Netanyahu seems to get away with anything and everything and continues to be defiant even in the face of American pressure. You know, many have asked, if America wanted, it could have cut off US military supplies to Israel. Why hasn't it done so? Is it because the Biden administration does not want to take a difficult and unpopular decision of being seen as deserting an ally on the eve of an election? And is that something that Netanyahu is taking advantage of? That's what many analysts, including in the United States, are asking today.
So first, Nia, I would like to state that having been behind the scenes, the cooperation is much wider than people understand or see. And the fact that someone is saying out loudly, don't, doesn't always mean that he actually means don't. You saw that U.S. was informed about the ground invasion. Sadly, it also leaked from their side, which could have endangered Israeli troops when Biden, hours before the invasion, actually said that it's coming in the coming hours, and that he knows more than the reporter that asked him, which was maybe a slip of the tongue there. But still, the cooperation is at a high level. And in the end, Hezbollah is the axis of evil. Hezbollah has killed many Americans, many French, many Muslims as well, and it's designated terrorist organization in many countries around the world. So I don't think that the Americans are so sorry to see the back of him. One of the other Hezbollah executives who was killed a couple of weeks ago had a bounty on his head of $7 million by the U.S. administration. So I don't think that they are sad to see that go. The main goal, though, as you stated, is peace and quiet. The U.S. elections have actually started. People don't know this, but people are already voting in early elections, absentee ballots, post ballots, etc. So this is now the time for the U.S. To rein everybody in. And of course, they do not want an all-out war. I think that is also why they warned Israel specifically about this attack, hoping that, again, if this attack is thwarted like it was in April, maybe they can rein Israel in to a more proportionate attack as opposed to what Netanyahu actually promised in his speech just yesterday.
All right, so the million-dollar question still remains. What is Iran going to do next? Are American inputs correct in pointing to an imminent Iranian ballistic missile attack on Israel? How far is Iran willing to go? Could it be a token attack? Could it be a fierce attack deep inside Israeli territory? And if that happens, are we likely to see a full-blown war between the long-standing foes? And if that does happen, where does that leave the United States? Where does that leave the Middle East? And I don't say this lightly. This certainly is not a joke, but there are many who've been saying for days now that given what's happening in the Middle East, the region being a veritable tinderbox, it's almost as if we are staring at the beginning of World War III. That's how dangerous this situation is at the moment. On that note, Itai Melchior, Major General Ashwini Sivaj, Chirayu Thakkar, thank you so much to all three of you for joining me on Global Lens tonight. This is a story we'll continue to track very, very closely here on Global Lens. Let's see what happens next. The million-dollar question is, what is Iran going to do? Thanks very much for watching.
PM Modi is the first ever Indian Prime Minister to visit Ukraine. His visit comes 2 years after around 17,000 Indian students were safely evacuated amidst the Russia-Ukraine war under his leadership. Watch Airlift, the story of how the evacuations unfolded, only on the News 9 Plus app.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए। और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है मनी 9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
Hello and welcome to the News 9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News 9 Plus. Here are the top headlines today. The Supreme Court has said public safety is paramount and any religious structure encroaching on roads or rail tracks must go. Hearing petitions challenging bulldozer action on the 1st of October, the Apex Court extended its order barring demolitions across the country without prior judicial approval. Protesting junior doctors in West Bengal resumed their indefinite cease work strike on the 1st of October. Their demands on ensuring the safety of doctors at all medical establishments are yet to be met. Karnataka Chief Minister Siddaramaia's wife Parvati has offered to surrender 14 sites allotted to her by the Mysore Urban Development Authority or MUDA. In a letter to the MUDA Commissioner, she asked him to cancel the title deeds. Jammu and Kashmir went to the polls in the final phase of assembly elections on the 1st of October. In the final phase, more than 39.18 lakh eligible voters decide the fate of 415 candidates across 40 seats. Results will be out on the 8th of October. Army Chief General Upendra Dwivedi said the situation with China along the line of actual control in eastern Ladakh was stable but not normal. Saying that trust was the biggest casualty, he said the ground status that existed before April 2020 must be restored. Around 120 people from Ladakh, including climate activist Sonam Wangchuk, who had marched to Delhi from demanding 6th scheduled status for the Union Territory, were detained by the Delhi police at the Singhu border. The flood situation in Bihar remains critical with over 12 districts affected by rising waters. Chief Minister Nitish Kumar did an aerial survey of the affected districts on the 1st of October. Popular actor Govinda was hospitalized after he suffered a bullet injury on his leg early in the morning of 1st of October. The actor is out of danger. He accidentally misfired his licensed revolver at home, police said. Israeli forces have begun limited, localized and targeted ground raids in Lebanon days after Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah was killed in an airstrike. Meanwhile, US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin spoke with Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant and reiterated serious consequences for Iran if Tehran chooses to launch a direct military attack against Israel. Israeli soldiers have finally started ground raids into southern Lebanon. Israel wants to push Hezbollah, the militant group, north of the Litani River to create a buffer zone in southern Lebanon. Now, southern Lebanon is also likely to see the heaviest fighting between Israel and Hezbollah. The area south of the Litani River covers about 850 square kilometers and it's home to approximately 2 lakh residents. Importantly, 75 of the people of southern Lebanon are Shia Muslims, the community from which Hezbollah draws its strength. The remaining 25% comprise Sunni Muslims, Druze and Christians. So the questions we're asking are, will Israel be able to push Hezbollah beyond the buffer zone north of the Litani River? What happened the last time Israel launched a ground invasion of Lebanon in 2006, also against the Hezbollah? Is this going to be a fight to the finish in 2024? And more importantly, are these ground raids the start of a full-fledged ground invasion of southern Lebanon, or will these just be limited in scope? Joining me to discuss this are Major General V.K. Datta and former journalist and military veteran Major Arunikant Sinha. And in the studio, I have with me my colleague Deepak Badana. Gentlemen, welcome to the News 9 Plus show. General Datta, I want to start by asking you this. Make sense of these ground raids into southern Lebanon. What are the Israelis planning to achieve with these incursions? Are these softening up operations? Are these probing operations? Or are they trying to create launch pads for a larger invasion or a larger ground invasion into southern Lebanon?
We had discussed this particular topic yesterday, and we had, in fact, discussed about the action which Israel is going to take now,
right,
after the initial launch of the airstrikes and the decimation of the command, control, and communication of Hezbollah. And if you recollect, my understanding is that Israel is definitely going to create a buffer zone,
right,
to ensure that the safety of the residents of northern Israel is
Yes.
ensured and the people who have been displaced are brought back to their homes.
Right.
Now, keeping that in mind, Israel has already carried out the phase 1 of the operations in Lebanon,
Yes.
which involved the getting the command control elements.
Right.
Now they are doing the ground action where the entire Israeli forces which are required to launch an offensive into Lebanon, southern
Yes.
Lebanon in particular, have concentrated in the north of Israel.
Right.
It's a heavy concentration.
Yes.
There's armor, there are special forces, there are para brigades, and all the elements which are actually carrying out operations in Gaza have been now pulled out,
Right.
and they are now enmassed on the Lebanese border.
Right.
Now, getting such a large force on the border and just sitting idle does not make a sense.
Right.
Therefore, the ground operations have now commenced. The first probing attacks carried out by the special forces and the paratroopers of the
Yes.
Israeli forces have commenced. Whenever a trooper or a paratrooper battalion or a organization is used, it
Yes.
is always used to either capture a defile with a link up in mind. Link up
Right.
means that the mechanized forces will subsequently come and
Yes.
link up with that force which has already gone in.
Right,
As far as
absolutely.
the special forces are concerned, they have gone in to probe and look for any tunnel openings, any place where they're going to have these missile launchers,
Right.
or where the ammunition emplacement or dumps are there. So
Right.
these are the pathfinders
Right.
for the main operation to commence. So this is, I'll say, the phase 1 of the
Right.
ground operation. Of the phase 2 of the Israeli overall strategic plan has
Yes.
been launched.
That,
And
right.
they will now slowly
Yes.
and gradually.
So these are
gradually
probing
progress.
operations. Yes. So very
Yes.
important observations there, General Datta. And who else but General Datta, who's served, who's actually been a veteran of the 1971 war. I want to ask General Datta about that war later on. But this is important that these are probing operations meant to actually assess what the ground is like in southern Lebanon. It's one of the most heavily defended war zone theaters. But Deepak, the interesting thing about Lebanon is that they say, Mark Twain had that saying, history never repeats, but it rhymes. Yeah. But if you look at Lebanon, it's almost history repeating itself. This is exactly what happened in 2006, just 18 years back, when you had Israel going in because some of its soldiers were attacked by Hezbollah. They launched a full-scale ground assault, and that war lasted 34 days before the ceasefire was called.
I would still say that history is kind of rhyming, because this time Israel seems to have both the preparation and the intent
Yes.
to do what it wants to do. You are seeing them going about it in a very structured and very organized manner.
Right, right.
And I don't anticipate the sort of casualties that
Yes.
the Israelis faced the previous time.
Right, right, absolutely. And but talking about 2006, we have with us Major Arunikant Sinha, very interesting background, Kargil veteran, left the army, joined a TV channel and covered the Lebanon war for the TV channel. Major Sinha, welcome to the News 9 Plus show. Tell us what the 2006 experience was like for someone like you from both sides. You saw war from the military and then you saw it as a journalist. Describe to us why the 2006 war was such a unusual kind of war, because bear in mind, we were just discussing how Hezbollah is literally a conventional army. It has the kind of equipment that conventional armies use. They have ballistic missiles,
They have numbers
anti-tank
and
missiles,
organization.
and they have a full-fledged military at their. But Major Sinha, without much ado, tell us what 2006 looked like as a journalist.
Oh, right. Sandeep, it was a very different war to start with. The difference over here, of course, is that was almost, immediately. This time around, they're going in almost after an year.
Right.
7th of October, if I remember correctly. So clearly they had a lot of time to work it out. Actually, they are going by the lessons of the 2006 war. The Vinograd Commission, Eliyahu Vinograd.
Yes, yes. But tell us, Major Sinha, tell us what the lessons of the 2006 war were and how is Israel going to implement them in 2024? Because what I heard when I was in Israel last week, they said, listen, Hezbollah is a war that we have been preparing for nearly 2 decades. This is our plan A and we're going to go after them this time. But tell us what the lessons were from 2006, which they are likely to implement now, almost 2 decades later.
So the Vinograd Commission clearly states that, that it was a serious missed opportunity. That's how it called the Second Lebanon War. Amongst the two things, couple of things which they said, I'll just stick to the point which is relevant over here. They said that the decision to react immediately limited Israel to just 2 options. Either a standoff or an all-out invasion. And it wasn't prepared for an all-out invasion. So you see the way they have gone about this, first of all, and it's beautifully orchestrated if you look at it. The decapitation of the leadership didn't start with, with the Haniyeh in July or with, it actually started in May with them going after, and that is pure divinity. I do not know how that panned out, but with Resi, Ibrahim Resi, his death. And all of a sudden, somebody who had been very heavily invested upon and was supposed to take over, that's the word between him and, the current leader's son. Between them, one of them was supposed to be, so what it was being told, was going to be the next supreme leader of Iran. And all of a sudden that leadership is gone. And mind you, he had very good relationship with China, with Russia.
No, important point there, Major Sinha. The fact that, the lessons that Israel learned from the last war in 2006 was not to rush into a war immediately, but to take your time. And that's what they seem to have done this time around. Waited nearly a year. Launched these special operations, those surgical strikes, this decapitation operations and all of that, and now they are ready with the final phase which General Datta outlined for us, which is the ground assault, phase 1 and phase 2. But Lev Aren joins us from Israel. Lev, welcome to the News 9 Plus show. Lev, I was in Israel last week and I can tell you this, that there were friends of mine who were reservists in the IDF who literally picked up bags and disappeared because they had got their call up to go to the northern front. What's the situation like right now in Israel after the decapitation of Hezbollah and this northern theater that seems to be opening up?
I think the biggest achievement of Israel right now is that Hezbollah does not even know which of its officers is an Israeli agent or a loyal soldier of Hezbollah. And once we have achieved this, everything on the ground is a bit easier because on one hand, you see that Israel is not even rushing to the Litani River right now. It takes like 4, 5, 6 kilometers, depends on which front. We brought 98th Division. If it was in India, it would be called the Agni Division. It's like the Fire Division. Which got a lot of experience in Han Yunis. And the fact that we don't speak too loudly and we let our best units speak on the ground, as well as our intelligence and Air Force, it is a huge difference. And in a way, the Israelis, we are quite used to the fact that from age 18 to 21, we are in the army. And after this, in 24 hours, they can call us whenever they want the army, and we are more than willing to defend our country. So in a way, this is like part of the psyche of Israel. And as you have witnessed, when the war with Hamas started, 3 lakh Israelis just came back to Israel to be a soldier. So this is like part of us.
Very unique military, and of course, what an exceptional fighting spirit that Israeli civilians show, because they're all trained soldiers, and we forget the fact that Israel is a garrison state for reasons that you just have to look into history. They've been literally fighting without a break since 1948. But General Datta, what are the lessons for India from all of this? We've been watching this war unfold for the last year. You've been a member of the Indian military and of course disaster response as well. And before that, you've been involved in very interesting agencies, special forces units. What's the distilled essence that India can learn from the Israeli Defense Forces in 2024?
See, the thing is that never let your guard down.
Right.
Prepare for the worst. Keep your powder dry.
Yes.
Because what may happen, and like Israel, India is also facing hostile neighbors all around us. And all the neighbors, and most of them, whether it is Pakistan on the west and China on the north and northeast, are nuclear capable with a large standing army.
Right.
So therefore, India is virtually sitting on a powder keg, and therefore, we as the Indian Army have to be fully prepared for tackling both Pakistan and China, and in addition, anything else within or from any other side.
Right.
So therefore, the lesson learned for India is that you have to be ready 24/7.
Yes.
You cannot start buying equipment when the war is imminent.
Right.
You have to be ready with that bare minimum capability,
yes,
which is adequate as a deterrent for your largest adversaries, either on the west or in the north and northeast. And therefore, the Army, Air Force and Navy has to be constantly in training, ready for operations.
Yes.
And the intelligence, which is a very big part of the entire game of planning and operation, has to be of the highest quality.
Yes.
You cannot, like India has also been surprised a number of times.
Yes.
Kargil, for example, it was a surprise to us. Pakistanis kept on making a fool that they are the, the militants and the terrorists and the Kashmiris. And now the shameless guys have finally admitted, and even Pervez Musharraf, before he died, is written in his book. But then they are total liars. They are the guys who sell their mothers to tell a lie and remain in power. Right. That is what Pakistan Army is.
Well, that's and yes, of course. And we are dealing with two very strange, militaries on our border. One's the military of a party, that is the Chinese military, and of course, one is the military that owns a country, which runs a country. But back to you, Aruni Khan Sinha, Major Sinha. This southern Lebanon is the focus of this entire operation, as we discussed, about 800 square kilometers. As a war correspondent, when you were there in 2006, give us a sense of what it was like there. Again, back to the fact that a very unusual war that was fought by a conventional military against a non-military actor that is trained, equipped, and operates like a conventional army. That's the Hezbollah's military wing. How much of a wake-up call was this for you when you saw these kind of, the ATGMs attacking main battle tanks? The Merkavas were attacked by Hezbollah. You had a warship, an Israeli warship, hit by an anti-ship ballistic, anti-ship missile fired by the Hezbollah. What kind of, learning did you take back with you when you saw all of this? Describe for us very swiftly.
Well, Sandeep, to start with, there were also a few Indian Navy warships, and we were actually taken in by INS. You remember Operation Sukoon, I think, if I'm not wrong, that's what it was called.
This Operation Sukoon, yes. But give us the military side of it, the Israeli Defense Forces side of it.
So we went till Ebdesaki. In fact, we had taken a vehicle. It's kind of in the fog of war. People on the border really thought it was really terrible back in Beirut.
Yes.
And people in Beirut said, "Oh, hang on, why are you going there? There are going to be potholes."
Yes.
There were potholes, but the roads were fairly navigable.
Right.
And on of course Lebanon side.
Yes.
And even back then, kudos to the way the Israeli army functions.
Yes.
It was pretty much pinpoint. What they were doing back then was pretty much pinpoint. It was not, and again, we were staying with the UNIFIL. There was an Indian armored corps regiment.
Yes.
No, or was it a mech regiment? It slips my mind. One of the boys were a couple of courses junior to me. We stayed with them. We were able to get an insight on what's going on in the other side. It's pretty much pinpoint, Sandeep. It's
pinpoint, exactly. That's how the Israeli military functions. And Lev, my closing question to you is this. What is the kind of war that we could expect to see based on what we've been reading about the Israeli military sending probing missions, as General Datta just explained, that these could be the opening phase of a war. But, give us your sense as a journalist covering this war in Israel. What appears to be on the horizon next?
Israel in Gaza and in Lebanon is totally opposite. About Gaza and West Bank, we have a big feud, domestic feud, left, right, if it is part of Israel, not part of Israel, etc.
Right.
With Lebanon, we are more united in the sense that no Israeli wants even a square inch of Lebanese territory to be part of Israel.
Right.
The only thing that we want is not to see the Hezbollah soldiers on the other side of the border.
Right.
So right now, and one more thing that we know, in Gaza, they have only 13-kilometer trench with Egypt.
Yes.
Otherwise, they're like all surrounded by Israel. It is very, very easy to surround Gaza. Again, relatively easy. While from the, let's say, Binj Bail, from the border between Israel and Lebanon up to Tehran or even Shabahar port, it's like 3,000 kilometers. We cannot really